Okay, so you're interested in fairness in elections
Uh-huh.
and how things went down in the U.S.
Yeah.
back in 2024.
Yeah.
It really was a fascinating one.
Absolutely fascinating.
You know, Trump versus Harris
It was down to the wire.
was.
Right.
It really was down to the wire. We're going to do a deep dive
Yeah.
using some excerpts from a pasted text document.
Okay, cool.
We've also got some really insightful stuff from PUW Research Center
John.
and Wired Magazine.
That's great.
So each of the candidates sort of had to navigate this really tight race,
Right.
and they both had very different approaches.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it's really interesting to see how this really reflects the deep divisions in our country
Oh, absolutely.
and how, like,
Right.
both parties are
Yeah.
kind of changing their strategies.
Their strategies are changing so much.
Yeah.
Right?
It's,
Yeah. So where do you want to start?
well, I mean, I think we've got to start with Trump. I mean, he had some really unexpected allies this time around,
He did.
like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
What?
Big names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big name influencer.
Influencers, yeah.
It seemed like he wasn't just focused on rallying his base this time.
Right.
Like he really wanted to broaden his appeal.
Yeah. He was going after
Especially to, like, young men,
young men.
working class voters.
Working class voters.
A lot of people in economically struggling areas.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, given the economic anxieties a lot of voters are facing.
I mean, it's a strategy that seems like it could be really effective.
And also the influence of social media on that demographic.
It's
huge.
yeah.
I mean, those personalities
I think
totally
it-
have sway.
Yeah. I mean, it really signals a potential shift
Uh-huh.
in how politicians are connecting with voters.
Wait.
It makes you think,
Totally.
like, what do you think this means for the future of political campaigning?
Oh, that's such a good question.
As these social media platforms are constantly evolving.
It's going to look so different.
Right.
Yeah. It's fascinating to think about.
Totally.
Yeah.
But getting back to this past election,
Okay.
Kamala Harris,
Yes.
she seemed to really focus on those traditional Democratic voters.
Right.
Women,
Uh-huh.
young people,
Yeah.
Black and Hispanic communities.
Classic Democratic voters.
Right.
Yeah.
And her platform
Mhm.
seemed to really emphasize progressive policies
She did.
like reproductive rights and healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare was a big one for her.
Yeah, and I think this
Yeah.
really resonates with what we're seeing in the Democratic Party as a whole.
Yeah.
This increasing emphasis on progressive ideals,
Yes.
social justice,
And identity politics.
yeah, and identity politics.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting because it really does mirror
It does.
the evolving priorities
Of
of younger generations,
younger,
more diverse generations.
more diverse generations.
Yeah,
And they're really gaining influence in politics.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's
really cool to see.
it is.
Yeah.
But even though they had these very different approaches,
Right.
the polls were so close.
They were
It was
neck and neck.
it was unbelievable.
Right.
It seemed like each candidate really resonated
Yeah.
within specific segments of the population.
Yeah. Makes sense, though.
Yeah, Harris was leading among
Uh-huh.
college-educated voters,
College-educated and younger voters.
younger voters,
Yeah.
but Trump was dominating with older voters,
Older and more rural voters.
rural voters.
Interesting how that divides out.
Yeah, and it paints
Yeah.
a very clear picture
Mm.
of a divided nation.
Yeah, and these demographic splits aren't
Yeah.
just about politics, they're about like
Values and beliefs,
values and beliefs.
and even lived experiences.
Exactly.
Right.
And it goes back to your original question
Yeah.
about fairness in the election.
Right.
How do you ensure fairness
Yeah.
when the electorate is so polarized?
It is a really important question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are struggling with it.
Totally.
Yeah. So how do we make sense of these deep divisions?
Right?
This, like, seemingly unbridgeable gap?
Yeah. Is there anything in the sources that we looked at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
gives us a picture of that?
Yeah. Is there anything? I
Yeah.
mean, the fact that the election was so close.
The fact that it was so close
Yeah.
tells us that like every vote counts.
Yeah. Voter turnout
Voter turnout.
and engagement within those demographics was crucial.
So crucial.
Yeah.
Both candidates really hammered that point home.
Right. They really
They
that-
knew that every vote could tip the scales.
I think that probably added to the anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So you mentioned fairness
Mm-hmm.
in the process itself, and I
Mhm.
think that's really important.
So,
We actually got some information
oh, yeah.
from ChatGPT
Oh.
about the integrity of U.S. elections.
What did you have to say?
Yeah, so just to reiterate,
Yeah.
we are simply relaying the information that it gave us.
Of course.
We are not
Yeah.
endorsing any particular viewpoint here.
Just laying it out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
ChatGPT emphasized the many safeguards in place to ensure a fair election.
Okay.
Things like regulations,
Regulations.
verification processes for voter registration,
Oh, interesting.
ballot tracking,
So we know where the ballots are
bipartisan oversight at polling stations.
to make sure everything's above board.
Uh-huh.
Gotcha.
It even mentioned that international observers are often invited
Oh, wow.
to help ensure transparency.
That's really interesting.
It's actually really fascinating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously no system is perfect,
Right.
but these measures do demonstrate a commitment
They do.
to upholding a free and fair election process.
Yeah. The U.S. electoral process has come a long way.
It has.
It's undergone a lot of scrutiny and reform
Yeah.
over the years.
To respond to concerns and new challenges.
Totally.
So, zooming out a bit,
Okay.
big takeaways from this deep dive
Yeah.
into the 2024 election.
What are they?
I mean, it was incredibly close.
It was super close.
It was driven by these contrasting campaign strategies,
Right.
these profound demographic divisions.
Yeah, we saw how that played out.
But it also
Mm.
highlights
Uh-huh.
how important voter engagement is,
Absolutely crucial.
participation in a
Yeah.
democracy.
Such an important takeaway.
Yeah. And it leaves us with some
Yeah,
pretty thought-provoking questions.
he does.
I mean, given how close it was
Yeah, how close it was.
and how those demographics
Hmm.
really influenced the outcome.
Shaped everything.
Yeah.
Totally.
How will this election shape future campaigns?
That's the question.
Are we going to see even more targeted messaging?
Oh, I'm sure we will.
Right.
Tailored to specific voter groups.
Right.
Down to the individual, practically.
Yeah. How are candidates going to address this polarization?
Yeah, how do we bridge that gap?
It's become so evident.
So evident in American society.
This election may be over,
Yeah.
but its impact is going to resonate
His.
for years to come.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's something for all of us to think
It's
about.
definitely something to mull over.
Yeah.
Right.
So much to consider
So much.
moving forward.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive
It was my pleasure.
into the 2024 election.
A fascinating one.
It was so much to unpack.
So much.
All right, we'll see you next time.
See you later.